This tutorial will cover drawing curves in Rhino. All geometry in Rhino is based on NURBS curves, which are defined by two or more control points and the degree of curvature, which controls the amount of smoothing between those control points. Let's start with the simplest kind of curve in Rhino, which is a line. So we can use the L alias or type in line command. And this will draw a line as a single straight line segment between 2 points. So we click the first point and click the second point to confirm the line. Here's our line. If we select it, we can hit F10 to reveal the 2 control points that we created. And you can see that we can now move around these control points, but that line will always be a straight line. And this straight line has degree 1. The next kind of curve we can create is a polyline. So we can type in PL or polyline. And we can start clicking control points to create this polyline. And when we're done, we can hit the right mouse button or spacebar. So a polyline is a curve that has any number of control points with a degree of 1. So the degree of 1 means there's no curvature in the line, and it hits every one of these control points exactly. So if we hit F10 again, we can see those control points, and we can move them around by typing in the move command and clicking on the start and end point, or by just interactively dragging it in the interface. So a polyline can be thought of as a curve with more than 2 control points and a degree of curvature of 1. It can also be thought of as a series of joined straight line segments. And in fact, we can explode that polyline into its constituent line segments by using the explode command. So we can type in explode. You can see that that separates that polyline into its individual line segments. We can also select all the lines, and as long as they meet exactly at their endpoints, we can use the join command to put them back together into one polyline curve. So explode and join are kind of sister operations that do the same thing in reverse. So now we can start looking at actual curve geometry. So we can use the curve command to create a curve. Here you see we can select the degree of curvature, and we can start to pick control points. And you see as we start to pick the control points, because now we have a degree of curvature higher than 1, the curve is actually interpolating between those control points. So we'll create 5 control points there. Now here's our curve. We can hit F10 to reveal those control points we created. But you can see how the curve isn't actually going through any of the control points except for the first and second, because it's interpolating and smoothing out that control polygon. So if we use the curve command again and we change the degree to 1, we're actually going to be creating the polyline again. So let's do a quick experiment. I'll delete all these lines. And first I'm going to draw a polyline through a series of points. I'm going to turn my grid snaps on. I'll draw this polyline going through some points like this. And now I'm going to draw 2 curves. I'm going to set the degree to 2 first and draw the control points through the exact same polyline. And I'm going to create another curve and change the degree to 3 and use the same exact points. So you can see that the higher the curvature we use, the more this curve interpolates and smooths out that control polygon. Also, with higher degree curves, more control points are going to influence the curve. So for example, if we work with this curve, I'll turn on the control points by hitting F10, and I drag this point. You can see that this portion of the curve is affected, but the initial portion is not. Now if we select this curve and hit F10, and I drag that same control point, you see that the first portion of the curve is also affected. So curvature is really important when you're working with curves. It's important to consider what kind of curvature you want to use depending on the kind of control and smoothing you want to achieve in your curves. So the basic curve command will allow you to specify the control points of your curve, but sometimes this isn't the most intuitive way to work with curves, because sometimes we want the curve to actually go through a specific set of points instead of interpolating them. So most often when you draw curves, you can actually use the interpolate curve command, and that's interp CRV. And this will allow you to actually click the points that the curve goes through. So these aren't actually the control points of the curve. What Rhino will do is it'll take the points that you click and it'll approximate a curve that goes through all those points. Now if we select that curve and show the control points, you can see that Rhino's figured out where to place those control points so that the curve goes through the points you want it to. But you're not specifying those curve points directly. Now if you have a curve, you can use Rhino's rebuild command by typing rebuild, and this will allow you to change the composition of the curve both in terms of the number of control points it has and its degree curvature. So if you select a curve and type rebuild, it's going to give you this interface showing you how many control points the curve has and how much degree curvature in these parentheses areas. And then you can specify new values, and Rhino will create a new curve that approximates the shape of your input curve as close as possible while maintaining these parameters. So using rebuild, we can do a lot of things. For example, we can take this curve, and by changing, we can keep the control point count the same and change the degree to 1, and that will actually create a polyline that approximates that curve the best. And you see that when that approximation isn't exact, it will tell you what the maximum deviation is in terms of your units, and it'll show you where that maximum deviation occurs with this red line. So using this rebuild, we can also simplify the curve by typing in less control points and maybe keeping the same degree. And if we click OK, it accepts the new curve, and you can see now we have less control points. So Rhino also features a set of curve primitives that you can use instead of drawing curves from scratch. And a lot of these are available here in the curve menu bar. So some examples are circles. You can draw circles of any radius. Ellipses, which allow you to draw an ellipse based on dimensions of 2 axes. Rectangles, which create a rectangle from 2 points. Polygons, so this will create a regular polygon with a specified number of sides. And finally the helix, which I'll go into the perspective viewport for. Helix will create a spiral based on an axis, so we'll select the vertical keyword and drag a vertical axis, and then a radius.